Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Elena Pinto this week.
And it's an honor now to sign this incredible bill and get our country working again. Thank you.
The government may be back in business, but it took putting the intoxicating hemp industry on a year notice.
And we do not see this as recriminalization. We see 1 year to regulate, not 1 year to ban. And that's where we are marching.
We have more reaction from the industry and the leaders from the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, including General Counsel Jonathan Miller.
Unfortunately, that bill also gave or acknowledged the jurisdiction over the sale and production of CBD and other hemp products was delegated to the FDA. The FDA pledged that they were going to start regulating our products. Unfortunately, it's 7 years later and they've done nothing.
That complete interview in its entirety at the end of the C Block. Plus, why are major MSOs happy with the decision that could wipe out a $28 billion unregulated part of the cannabis industry? And what impact will this have on rescheduling or any other cannabis reforms at the federal level? All that and more on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Elena Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly report on the fight to end cannabis prohibition in the United States and around the world. I'm Elena Pinto. A week ago, the United States Senate saw 9 Democrats break ranks with their party in order to get the government back to work and pass a budget bill. In that bill, an amendment was added that could effectively wipe out 95% of the THC-infused hemp-derived products that has grown into a $28 billion business. This all started with the Farm Bill of 2018. At that time, Congress effectively gave a legal definition of hemp, which had less than 0.3% of THC in dry weight, the intoxicating cannabinoid in the cannabis sativa plant. In that bill, the FDA was charged with coming up with the regulations for the plant, but 7 years later, still nothing has happened. Now you have hundreds of thousands of workers employed in this part of the cannabis industry and revenue over $28 billion. Even the leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, admitted that 2018 Farm Bill and the so-called loophole was a mistake. This new law will not go into effect for 1 year, so the industry and lawmakers still will have time to do something about the industry that was created by accident. In their defense, the hemp industry has been looking for regulations since that bill was passed, but companies started to create products that were effectively legal, but were underregulated. There was no age gating regulations, no testing, and these products started to show up at gas stations, smoke shops, and convenience stores. On top of this, the other side to this plant that was legal for adults to use in 24 states is overregulated. So the government created 2 sides to the same plant. One that was overregulated, tested, and licensed for distribution, and the other was the exact opposite, despite both industries developing products for sale from the same plant. One of the most well-respected authorities on hemp is Thomas Winstanley, the executive vice president of edibles.com. For 5 years, he worked at Theory Wellness, a licensed cannabis dispensary in multiple states, and now is on the other side of the plant. Executive producer Jimmy Young talked with Thomas on Friday.
Thanks, Elena. As we continue to look at the fallout and get reaction from the hemp industry about this week's news, I'm so happy to be joined by an old buddy from Massachusetts. His name is Thomas Winstanley. He used to be the chief marketing officer of Theory Wellness for, I'm pretty sure, about 5 years, and now is an executive VP for a company called edibles.com. So, Thomas, thank you so much for joining us. And the thing that I knew that where I knew you were and what you were doing is when I was reading quotes this week, you were so eloquent on so many of the newsletters that I read. So look, walk me through, did you expect this to happen? There was, I certainly understand enough of the backroom stuff that has been going on, but did you have any warning? Did you think that this issue would actually bring the government back to work?
So I think we have always had a consideration knowing that we are not on stable ground from a policy perspective. We've constantly fought to gain policy at the federal level that would codify the industry in a way that the Farm Bill did not, with consumer protections, a four-pillar of regulatory guidance to allow this category to continue to grow. We've seen some of that regulatory implementation at a state level, but not quite at the federal level. We knew also that Mitch McConnell is passionate about this and that he was not going to back down, especially in a swan song of his political career. Did we expect it to manifest the way that it did around a government shutdown? Probably not. Did we see it coming? We always had an inkling that it was possible, and it wasn't until I think Wednesday that we heard that this language that we had been fighting, a poison pill, if you will, had been slipped into the minibus package, which was very unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I've learned a lot. I watched the Dales report this week. I'm going to give them credit. And he explained how the bourbon lobby, and by the way, my naivete, who the hell knew if there was even a bourbon lobby?
A lobby for everything, Jimmy.
I guess so. And that's how this is how this country works. And I've had a great lesson on the one thing that this country does better than anything is delay, delay, and delay. And then the only time they make any noise in the government is when they have to pass a bill like the appropriations bill. And of course, the government could shut down at the end of January again, right? I mean, that's pretty much how. If the government is the largest business in the world, I have no idea how they stay in business. I mean, that's how I think.
By procrastinating and doing everything at the last minute and shoehorning as much in as possible. And I think that's what we were subjected to. And unfortunately, it's very difficult when we are actively lobbying. We're one of the only industries that goes to Capitol Hill and says, please regulate us.
Right.
Please put laws on us. And here's what we recommend for you to do, because for people like Mitch McConnell, the worst irony is that 85% of his concerns are concerns that we, as good operators in the category, have concerns about. And yet, political action and theater at its finest came down to the wire and was a let's overstuff something because there cannot be thoughtful discussion around it.
The rest of that interview will be released on Thursday of next week in our 1v1 special report. There's another amendment to that appropriations bill that was put in place this week that once again hurts our veterans. After making some progress towards reform over the last year, this latest appropriations bill puts the hemp industry on a one-year notice, also shuts out veterans from access to medical cannabis at VA hospitals. It was easy for the Republican-controlled government to leave that provision out of its budget. We have to ask, though, how can lawmakers continue to prohibit doctors at the VA from prescribing cannabis to the men and women who fight for our freedoms in our military, especially in legal states? That is a question that continues to get ignored, yet has been on the agenda for years. And what makes matters even worse is that in addition to the ban on hemp products, this appropriations bill left out cannabis access through VA hospitals and announced it on Veterans Day this week. We sure could use some clarity on the reasons why that keeps happening, and opioids are being prescribed like candy through the VA. As you can imagine, Jimmy Young was pretty busy this week, as was our hemp reporter, Carrie Hinkle. And this past Friday afternoon, both had a conversation with the general counsel for the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, Jonathan Miller. He was on his way back to his state of Kentucky and still had time to talk from his car.
Thanks, Elena. It's been a difficult week in the world of hemp. And we are so fortunate to be talking with two people. One, of course, you may know if you watch Cannabis Coast to Coast News on a regular basis. His name's Carrie Hinkle. It's his beat. And he used to work for the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, which is the #1 lobby group in Washington, D.C. And we're so fortunate to have their general counsel, Jonathan Miller, joining us, too, as he cruises around is it the greater Kentucky or the greater Maryland, Washington, D.C. area, Jonathan?
I am heading from Lexington to Louisville.
Okay,
Kentucky.
there you go. And You will definitely have some insight on what's going on and what happened this week. So I guess the first question I do want to ask is, how in the world did this happen, Jonathan?
Well, we had a big victory back in 2018,
Yeah.
and thanks to Mitch McConnell, who really got us where we were going. Hemp was legalized after prohibition for decades, and specifically, hemp's derivatives, cannabinoids, and extracts were also made clear to be legal because CBD had been around for a bit, and we wanted to make sure that CBD would be covered. Unfortunately, that bill also gave or acknowledged that jurisdiction over the sale and production of CBD and other hemp products was delegated to the FDA. The FDA pledged that they were going to start regulating our products. Unfortunately, it's 7 years later and they've done nothing. They even a few years ago said, after investigating this for 4 years, that we need more authority from Congress to do this. And so what happened was, while this CBD market grew and other great hemp products, such as hemp beverages like the ones that Carrie's company produces, there are also some bad products out there. There are products that are marketed to kids and that have bad manufacturing practices, or are copycats of Doritos or candy bars, and it's gotten a lot of people upset. And so there are two solutions to that. One is the FDA can finally start regulating these products, as states have started to. The other solution, unfortunately, has been we should ban everything, not just the bad products, but the good ones as well. And ironically, it was Mitch McConnell who is the one that drafted this legislation, which is basically would ban 95% of all hemp products if we're not able to overturn it in the next year.
We will be running that entire interview on the C block of Cannabis Coast to Coast News at the end of this week's program. But if you want to know some inside politics on how all this happened, the Dales report shared information about the powerful bourbon whiskey lobby that was instrumental in putting some money into this congressional fight. In this country, it does seem to be those who have the most money can dictate policy in Washington, D.C. The biggest MSO saw the hemp industry as a threat, as did big alcohol. So those groups were far more influential and impactful than the fledgling hemp interests. With more now from Washington, D.C., we welcome back Andrew Barringer.
I'm Andrew Barringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Positive news. The government is open and I am happy to be reporting again. Downside, how did this shutdown affect the cannabis and hemp industry? Well, President Trump has signed a federal spending bill that will ban most consumable hemp products, reversing course on legislation he signed during his first term in office. Now, this move comes tucked inside an appropriations package passed after a weeks-long government shutdown that brought critical agencies to halt, the longest in history. Now, the Senate approved the spending bill on Monday, followed by a narrow House vote Wednesday, 222 votes to 209. Now, hidden within this legislation is a provision that recriminalizes hemp products containing THC, products that have flourished since the 2018 Farm Bill legalized the hemp crop. Now, under these new rules, which take effect 1 year from now, legal hemp products will be limited to just 0.4 milligrams of total THC per container. Now, that's a dramatic shift from the current law, which allows products with less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC by dry weight. Now, the ban will now cover Delta 8 other THC isomers and cannabinoids deemed to have similar effects. This legislation also prohibits synthesized cannabinoids and bans intermediate hemp products marked directly to consumers. Now, within the next 90 days, the FDA must publish comprehensive lists of naturally occurring cannabinoids and THC compounds. This ban faced a lot of bipartisan resistance. Now, hemp advocates warn that the ban sweeps too broadly, affecting even non-intoxicating CBD products that people use for medical purposes. But a White House spokesperson confirmed the president specifically supports the hemp language. Some legislators are suggesting that this delay could allow lawmakers to create a proper regulatory framework rather than an outright ban. Now, the spending bill also drew criticism for what it left out. Bipartisan provisions that would have allowed Veterans Affairs doctors to recommend medical cannabis in legal states were stripped from the final package, despite earlier approval from both chambers. Now, this omission coming just days before Veterans Day. With the clock now ticking on the one-year implementation deadline, the question now is whether can we build enough support to pass remedial legislation before the ban takes effect. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer. Thanks for having me back at Cannabis Coast to Coast News. See you next week.
So what impact will this have on the rescheduling or legalization movement at the federal level? Well, there continues to be murmurs from the White House that rescheduling of cannabis is still being discussed. But once again, no one thinks that might happen anytime soon. In fact, many think the Republican-controlled government will wait until next fall before the midterms in order to impact voter turnout. We start our state reports now in Virginia with Joe Parsons.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 through WV and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. One of the champion pioneers of the 2024 and 2025 adult use cannabis bills is eager to work with the new administration and present another round of bills before the General Assembly. Senator Aaron Rouse from District 22 was the lead author working alongside Representative Paul Krizik to craft the bills that received bipartisan support and were ultimately shut down by Governor Glenn Youngkin, not once, but twice in a row. In an interview with WVEC's 13 News Now, Senator Rouse said, quote, any measure that we can take to find revenue, I'm very optimistic about that approach, end quote. He further added, quote, we in Virginia have to take every step we can to make sure we find revenues that strengthen our communities, that strengthens the education process, that puts food on the table, and gets people back to work, end quote. He's been very eager to work with Governor-elect Spanberger to finally enact the will of the people that voted for adult use legalization in 2021. Governor-elect Spanberger has gone on the record saying that she will, quote, work with the leaders in the General Assembly to find a path forward that both prioritizes public safety and grows Virginia's economy. And that part is establishing a formalized, legal, emerging cannabis market, end quote. I'll keep everyone updated as developments arise on this year's cannabis bills, so stay tuned. November is a month to remember the veterans, and this year the Virginia Veterans Canna Competition did just that. The competition was held this year in Pamplin, Virginia at the Second 40 to 420 Farms. I was able to get out there and see the veterans support one another and have a blast while doing it. Along with multiple food vendors, veteran craft vendors, they even had a supportive pony booth. Games ranged from tug of war to bong pong. All the proceeds went directly to the veterans, and you can bet that I'll be there for next year as well. I'd like to thank Brian Natsky and Amy Ward for inviting me to this terrific event. So a very special happy Veterans Day to all the heroes that keep America free every day. You can trust I will continue to fight to free the plant for you in the future. Well, that's going to do it from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV in Charlottesville. And as always, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
That'll do it for the A block, but we have more state reports coming up, plus more industry reaction from the new rules for the hemp industry as Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this.
I think there's a huge irony in this where Mitch McConnell is the master of unintended consequences.
Your cannabis business could be overpaying by hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal income taxes because of one simple assumption that you're making about your accountant. A dispensary owner in Colorado called me frustrated as hell. He'd been working with the same accountant for 3 years. His accountant said, "What's 471C?" Here's what the ignorance of that accountant was costing this business owner. $180,000 every single year for 3 years. 471C has been around since 2017. We're talking about an 8-year-old tax provision that many cannabis CPAs don't fully understand. 471C is one of the most complex and highly debated tax strategies in the cannabis industry. If you want to make sure you're not leaving any money on the table, I'm offering free 471c reviews this month. Link in the description.
Accounting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
If you want to make history, if you want to be part of history, if you want to say you helped legalize marijuana in America, now is the time to join us.
Hi there, I'm Ava from WPCM TV, your friendly media host. Big news, MJ BizCon 2025 is coming up December 2nd to 5th at the Las Vegas Convention Center, the premier business-to-business cannabis business conference and expo, where over 200 speakers, over 70 sessions, and a massive show floor await. If your brand is ready to make serious noise in the cannabis industry, here's your chance. We've got a few open slots for short on-site brand media interviews with our WPCM TV news crew. Picture this: your logo, your message, and your team in front of a professional camera, captured during the biggest cannabis gathering of the year. And yes, we promise we'll keep the jokes light. Why jump in? Because MJ BizCon isn't just another trade show. It's where the industry connects, learns, sources new products, explores innovation, and builds relationships that matter. Spots are limited and moving fast. If you're ready to elevate your brand and grab national-level exposure with WPCM TV on site, let's lock this in now. Click the link in the description, drop us a message, and we'll save a media slot just for you. Let's make your brand one of the stars of MJ BizCon. See you in Vegas.
Germany, which continues to be the fastest growing European market. Cresco Labs has an international manufacturing partner in Portugal, and they are partnering with a company called Blossom, and those products will be available with a prescription in German markets. Now let's check in on the UK with Dave Barton.
I'm Dave Barton from Thermidor with the UK Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. As Medical Cannabis Month continues here in Britain, 7 years on from legalization, the battle for awareness rages on. To that end, the All-Party Parliamentary Group, or the APPG for Medical Cannabis, has recently made a number of recommendations to the UK government, outlining the need for policy reform around patient access and clinician confidence, rebuilding guidance on real-world evidence, supporting UK producers to secure economic gains, commissioning a review to remove duplication and regulatory friction. Without urgent reform, we will continue to see patients suffer, and the UK will lose a once-in-a-generation opportunity to build a world-leading medical cannabis industry, states the APPG. It's estimated that the industry could generate about £5 billion per annum, but if cannabis was provided to chronic pain patients instead of other treatments, then the potential savings could amount to around over £23.6 billion. That's all for this week's UK Report. I'm Dave Barton from Thermidor, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
This is Debi Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News Report. So what we have in Canada this week is Canada's new cannabis amnesty law, Bill C-93, is offering a limited relief by providing burdensome record suspension instead of automatic expungements, leaving most of the 500,000 Canadians with minor possession convictions, especially Black and Indigenous people, without meaningful real charges. So they're not going to exempt all of these charges for the ones that do have minimal crime, but they're going to basically expunge it in a way so it's not going to be on their record anymore. Great. Next, what we have is a survey has come out for our new Prime Minister, Mike Carney. Or sorry, I say Prime Minister Carney. The government would like him to actually step up and start creating a more modernized way for the policy to become more reformed. And so the illicit market doesn't necessarily succeed anymore and are no longer profitable, which is great. And next what we have is the Bluetooth dab rigs are coming into the market, and they're making a great profit, especially for our Canadian stores. They are making it so not only are they interchangeable, but they're also able to be utilized in many different ways with different concentrates, and that's amazing. So when it comes to the Canadian news, this is Debi Facey coming at you with the Canadian Coast to Coast report. Peace.
In another state with a legal medical report is in Arkansas. The first 10 months of sales in that state this year has brought in a record of $240 million, which is really small in comparison with any adult use legal state, which is another reason why many states with medical only markets look to add adult use sales. That's true in Florida and in Oklahoma, where their ballot petition signature drive just failed. Kimmie Cannabis has more from that state, but first, time out for an AI-generated bong hit. Check out this creation by Kimmie.
All right, time to go big. Let's light this thing. Woo, that'll do it. Vegas, here I come. Look at that view. Kimmie Cannabis taking flight. Made it. Welcome to the Marijuana Business Conference. I am Kimmie Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with your Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This weekend, Oklahoma's cannabis and wellness community came together for a powerful event, Nurturing Naturally, exploring holistic parenting, hosted by one of the most authentic and heartfelt leaders we have, Ebony Jones. Ebony is more than a doula, more than a chef, more than an event planner, and more than a cannabis educator. She is a pillar of compassion in Oklahoma. Her ability to create safe, educational, and deeply supportive spaces is unmatched. This weekend's event showcased her gift for bringing families and communities together through holistic wellness, plant education, and nurturing guidance. Ebony continues to elevate our state with her service, her leadership, and her unwavering commitment to the people she serves. She deserves all the praise for her contribution to our community. And over at the Oklahoma State Capitol, another powerful voice was at work. Ashton Cole stepped up as MC for an advocacy surrounding Leo's Law, legislation aimed at requiring stricter fentanyl testing before children are placed back into the homes of parents struggling with addiction. His presence, his passion, and his dedication helped raise awareness for a law that could save lives and protect Oklahomans' most vulnerable children. Ashton's work to this weekend reminds us that our community is full of people fighting for real change. And let's not forget, cannabis is harm reduction. From the grassroots to the Capitol steps, our advocates continue showing up where matters most. That's it from Oklahoma. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
I am Jenny Germano with ICS Consulting. This is the Colorado Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. On Friday, November 14th, 2025, Colorado will be hosting a cannabis research roundtable. The roundtable is going to be hosted by the Institute of Cannabis Research. It is a multidisciplinary summit to understand Colorado's cannabis research needs at the intersection of scientific research, cannabis policy, regulation, and industry. This research roundtable has an incredible lineup. The Colorado Governor's Office, Pueblo County Marijuana Liquor and Licensing, the Colorado Department of Transportation, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, Colorado state representatives, as well as operators. Colorado Leads, which is Colorado's cannabis lobbying group, will be there. CU Boulder, UNC, CU Anschutz, and the Colorado School of Mines, including regulators from across Colorado, industry leaders, and experts will all be at this roundtable. On top of these panel discussions, they're going to be breaking out into these roundtable breakout sessions where they're going to focus on topics like health, safety, and consumer protection, therapeutic applications and medical research, production, quality, and regulatory standards, education and prevention, industry development. Colorado cannabis industry are coming together for research purposes. I'll be attending the event and coming back with any additional findings that might be helpful for listeners. I am Jenny Germano with ICS Consulting, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
New York continues to be one of the fastest growing states in the cannabis market of the United States. That should not come as any surprise since New York has 20 million people and just less than half live in the New York City area. One of the veteran-owned social equity-run dispensaries in Harlem is called Silly Nice. They are specialists in craft grows and are a small operation without a lot of inventory, so they have to rely on their online merchandise to supplement their revenue. This past week, that online merchandise operation was shut down by Stripe with no warning. Stripe, or Squarespace, has never been friendly to the cannabis world, whether you are a legal licensed entity or even an ancillary company like Pro Cannabis Media. Just another example of injustice towards the cannabis industry. But in California, you might remember this summer when immigration enforcement made a surprise raid of Glass House Farms and arrested 360 illegals who were working on that farm. Well, Glass House fired the recruitment company that had been filling jobs at that grow farm, and their third quarter earnings were drastically impacted. Glass House informed their investors this would happen, and now that the figures are in, revenues that were in the low 60 million range in 2024 came in at $38 million. With more from California, here's Dina Nagib.
I'm Dina Nagib, Principal Consultant at Grass Goddess Consulting, here to give you the latest developments in California for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. First up, Nicole Elliott, Director of the Department of Cannabis Control since 2021, announced recently that she will leave her position at the end of the year. She stated that she is stepping down not because the mission is complete, but because the foundation is strong. The news received a mixture of reactions, and with legal sales continuing to decline, finding the right replacement for the position will be critical. It is unknown who Elliott's successor will be, so stay tuned for that announcement. Turning to local news out of South Lake Tahoe. The city has reduced its cannabis tax rate from 6% to 3% after businesses said the high city tax was forcing customers away. There was some opposition, but the measure passed unanimously. This is an encouraging example of reducing taxes to keep the legal market viable. That's it for California news this week. I'm Dina Nagib from Grass Goddess Consulting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Now that New Jersey has a new governor in Mickey Sherrill, the hope is that some of the laws in that state might be changed. The biggest one is that the prohibition of home grow might finally be lifted, but that hasn't happened yet. This week, the Senate in the Garden State introduced legislation that would overrule local cities and towns that voted to ban adult use dispensaries and allow the medical dispensaries in those towns to sell to adults too. Since it is well established that when operators move from medical only to adult use, revenues expand exponentially. That also impacts the local taxes collected from those sales. So if this bill is passed, it would be a big lift for the industry. INSA is a Massachusetts-based dispensary with 3 locations in the Bay State and 3 more in Florida. They're expanding. The INSA group is now launching a vertical for their medical operation in Pennsylvania. That state continues to make a lot of noise about adding adult use to their existing medical market, but state lawmakers continue to battle with each other over control and expansion. This past week, their governor, Josh Shapiro, who wants to expand into the adult use market, is still pushing for his legislature to send him a bill he can sign. This week, he signed the budget without any room for reform because after a stalemate over the past 3 to 4 months, the Republican-controlled Senate continues to thwart any progress on this issue. Well, now let's check on another of the original 13 states, Massachusetts, with Curtis Emery.
I'm Curtis Emery, a bud tender from Resonate, Worcester, Massachusetts, with the Bay State Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. A continuing story here in Massachusetts as the state moves forward in trying to pass an act to modernize cannabis here in Massachusetts. That bill will be debated on by the state Senate next week. The bill was in front of the House this summer and has finally made its way to the Senate as it moves even closer to becoming a reality here in Massachusetts. That bill will do a variety of things to modernize the cannabis industry here in Massachusetts, including increasing the number of retail licenses, increasing the amount of product adult use or recreational customers can buy per day, and increase the power of the state to add additional commissioners to the CCC, allowing a little bit more oversight from the state government. Speaking of that, Carrie Bennenden is the newest member of the CCC. She comes over from the Attorney General's office and was assigned by the AG herself and members of the CCC. The CCC welcomes her and praises her ability to deal with law transparency, as well as her passion for social justice and equity initiatives. Should be a great addition to the CCC, who still have a long way to go to being a trusted body here in the state. Just recently, the Inspector General had actually made a comment reflecting on how there's still a lot of work that needs to be done at the CCC. It said that, very few, if any, organizations on the government level would be allowed to run in an environment as the CCC has it. So we're hoping that the CCC can get back on the right track and hopefully this new bill, which would modernize the cannabis laws, would allow more state oversight, more transparency, and make it better for the customers and those who work in the industry. I've been Curtis Emery with the Bay State Report, Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Next up in Nevada, in the Tribal Nations Report with Tina Tasaka, where Nebraska is continuing to threaten the Omaha tribe with police action once their adult use sales begin on their sovereign land. Here's Tina with more on that.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Iconic Representation, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Nevada legalized cannabis lounges years ago, but as of now, only one public lounge, Dazed at Planet 13 in Las Vegas, is fully operational, according to Fox 5 Las Vegas. They did not mention the tribally owned lounge Nuwu in downtown Las Vegas, owned by Las Vegas Paiute Tribe. Industry consultant Christopher Laporte discussed 3 big hurdles that are impacting the slowdown. First, public perception. People still think of lounges as simple smoke dens instead of full experiences like restaurants, theaters, or supper clubs. Second, real estate limits. Venues must be 1,500 feet from a casino, and many landlords won't lease to cannabis businesses. And lastly, funding challenges for first-time owners. The Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board has issued 28 conditional licenses and is trying to help operators with resource fairs and guidance, as shared by Steve Gilbert of the CCB. Creative concepts are in the pipeline: bowling alleys, massage spaces, infused dining, and Laporte predicts more lounges could open next year. Planet 13 Holdings, Nevada, is exiting its California cannabis operations, selling its Orange County retail store and other business assets, and closing its cultivation facility in Coalinga. The company says the move will streamline its footprint and free up resources so it can focus on what it sees as core growth markets, Nevada and Florida. Leadership framed the decision as part of a broader strategy to cut costs, improve efficiency, and concentrate on markets where Planet 13 has the strongest brand presence and scalability. A comprehensive new report from researchers at the University of California, Berkeley and Northeastern University reveals that cannabis cultivation in California threatens tribal cultural resources. In an article by Edith Friedman, UC Berkeley, the 2-year study shows much of the state's cannabis cultivation sits on flat, south-facing land near water, often the same areas as historic indigenous village sites or sacred places. After surveying tribal and agency representatives, researchers found that despite strong laws like Assembly Bill 52, major gaps remain. Agencies still hold most decision power, mapping of ancestral lands is flawed, and consultation is often a check-the-box process. To address this, the study offers a toolkit for tribes to strengthen their own consultation policies and a mapping tool to track cannabis activity on ancestral lands. That's it for the Nevada highlights and tribal nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Iconic Representation for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Now that the feds have weighed in on the ban of intoxicating hemp products, the attention turns back to the states who can abide by the ban or continue with whatever rules are already in place. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker said this week, in reaction to the federal changes, that he will have to take another look at the industry in his state. No one who is in the hemp industry is happy about the ban, and for years the industry has called for regulations and the FDA did nothing. So what about the future in Illinois for the Chicago clone guy? Well, here's Mark Allen to tell us.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, just outside of Chicago, Illinois. Thanks for tuning in. Today's hot topic, we're just going to jump right into it, is the quote-unquote hemp ban. This is, I don't know, I guess this is dear to my heart because I am literally a hemp farmer. I am literally a licensed hemp farmer, and all my fellow licensed hemp farmers in Illinois are freaking out. And, rightfully so, because, they slid this legislation they slid this ban into the government reopening, kind of just slid it in. And, Trump approved it, but that was Trump approving, getting the government back open, which should never been a shutdown to begin with. So whose fault is that for not voting on it? Now this is what we get. So anyways, but I'm going to get back to, I'm going to try to be politically correct. That's why I didn't really want to talk about this, to be honest with you, because I don't want to, but I'm going to. So this is what I think is going to happen. And we got to take a step back and understand how the government operates. The government doesn't operate as a quote unquote government to do the right thing. The government operates as a business because they are a business. They make money, they get power, they get control, and they are directly working with corporations, domestic and foreign, to do that. So the point is that this is operating like a business. This isn't done. It's going to get amended, and they're going to change it because even now Republican senators are coming out. Ted Cruz came out and said that we can't do this. We can't ban hemp because we all know that, we can't just do that. I mean, because Texas is making a ton of money off of it. Illinois is making a ton of money off it. If Illinois really wanted to ban this and thought it was bad, they would have banned it years ago. They're making a ton of money off it. Now, what I think does need to happen, what I do like about this is that any gas station you go to here in Illinois, Chicago, especially close to Chicago, but even where I'm at now in the country, especially these smoke shops, they are loaded full of these THC smokes, vapes, all this stuff that is loaded full of chemicals. Who knows where it's made? Who knows what's in it? There's no control. So what I think is going to happen is that they came in hot saying, we're going to shut it all down like they always do, like all big and mean. And now people are going to be like, wait a second, we need to talk about this. So now they're going to go back and they're going to go negotiate, and I think they're going to bring it back to the fact that we have licensed hemp farmers. Let's regulate it. Let's protect the industry. Let's protect these farmers. And I think there's going to be a negotiation. So I think cooler heads will prevail. But at the same time, I think that this is going to knock a lot of this fake weed off the shelves that's full of pesticides, full of poison, and it's nasty. But at the same time it's doing that, it's hurting people like me and my friends in the industry. So that is as politically correct that I could be right now, and as quick as I could be on this report to speak for, I guess, myself, because I'm not speaking for anybody else, because I'm in a different position with the way I utilize the hemp permit compared to people that are, you know, quote unquote growing hemp that gets you high. But that's a whole nother, that's how the law is written. You're allowed to grow that type of stuff. We are. But they're trying to, that's why it's changing now, but there needs to be some type of regulation, and it needs to be controlled. We just need to keep it clean and healthy. But this is crazy right now, so we'll see what happens. But that sums up my opinion on this hemp ban. I'm Mark Hill, the Chicago Clone Guy, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Thanks for tuning in.
That'll do it for the Beat Block. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this, and more of the interview with the General Counsel of the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, John Miller.
A matter of we have to do it, you know, or else this whole industry goes away. But Jonathan, I'm curious if you have more to add there.
No, you hit it right. You know, the one thing that we are looking at is perhaps trying to get this moratorium extended for another year, another 6 months. That could help us make a difference. But you know, we've been talking about these issues for 7 years now.
Hi there, I'm Ava from WPCM TV, your friendly media host. Big news, MJ BizCon 2025 is coming up December 2nd to 5th at the Las Vegas Convention Center, the premier business-to-business cannabis business conference and expo, where over 200 speakers, over 70 sessions, and a massive show floor await. If your brand is ready to make serious noise in the cannabis industry, here's your chance. We've got a few open slots for short on-site brand media interviews with our WPCM TV news crew. Picture this: your logo, your message, and your team in front of a professional camera, captured during the biggest cannabis gathering of the year. And yes, we promise we'll keep the jokes light. Why jump in? Because MJ BizCon isn't just another trade show. It's where the industry connects, learns, sources new products, explores innovation, and builds relationships that matter. Spots are limited and moving fast. If you're ready to elevate your brand and grab national-level exposure with WPCM TV on site, let's lock this in now. Click the link in the description, drop us a message, and we'll save a media slot just for you. Let's make your brand one of the stars of MJ BizCon. See you in Vegas.
Welcome back to the C block of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Elena Pinto. In Michigan, the fight against the 24% tax hike has moved into the courthouse. Plus, online hemp sales might be banned after the feds put intoxicating hemp products on a 1-year notice. And what impact will that have in Michigan? Here's Amie Carter with the Michigan Report, now sponsored by Wally's Wonderworld of customizable handmade humidors.
This is mold on wheat, this is mold on weed, and this is what this Wonderworld plant is supposed to look like. Do you want to make sure this never happens to your precious flower? Check out the handmade humidors by Fenton, Michigan craftsman Gregory Johnson. Each humidor can hold 1 ounce of your stash, and it comes with a Boveda humidity pack. You care about your flower, so protect it inside a humidor made with American-grown maple, cherry, or sapele wood. Check out their website at wallyswonderworld.com. There you'll find the famous award-winning Hakuna Matata No Worries Humidor. You'll also find a variety of humidors with different designs. They even customize accessories like doobie tubes, grinders, and even a classic roach clip from the 70s. Treat your stash with class with a custom-made, handmade humidor from wallyswonderworld.com, and never worry about moldy weed again.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Wheatsters, bringing you this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Let's jump into the green rush of stories for this week. Michigan regulators are stirring the pot with a confusing new memo. They reportedly want dispensaries to flag customers who buy more than the legal possession limit, which is 2.5 ounces. The catch, stores are still allowed to complete the sale. This vague guidance has retailers scratching their heads, leaving them frustrated and stuck between a rock and a legal limit. Graham's Cannabis is now open around the clock at their 2 locations, in Mount Morris and Romeo. The dispensaries will be open 24/7 from now on, allowing people to get cannabis at any time. Following years of explosive growth, especially in areas near state borders where out-of-staters fuel the market, some local communities are saying, hold up. Voters in Menominee, Niles, and Lima townships just passed measures to limit the number of dispensaries in their neighborhoods. It seems some communities are trying to keep their borders green, but not too crowded. Michigan's cannabis market saw one of its biggest month-over-month sales decline since recreational sales began in late 2019. Some analysts point to market oversaturation, lower pricing, and a possible plateau in consumer demand. It looks like the Great Lakes State's green rush might be hitting a little speed bump. And speaking of speed bumps in the road, we need to talk about what's happening behind the scenes at our state capitol. We are still dealing with some concerning bills in Lansing. These bills propose new restrictions that could significantly impact Michiganders. They are currently still in committee and have not yet been called for a vote. Michigan Weedsters is doing its best to educate Michiganders on what these proposed restrictions could mean for you. To learn more and stay updated, visit Michigan Weedsters on Instagram or Facebook. That's all the buzz for this week. I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The Michigan Report is sponsored by Wally'sWonderworld.com.
Washington State is one of the first states to decriminalize possession of cannabis. Matthew Friedlander is a business owner and an advocate for medical cannabis and involved with the Cannabis Alliance in Washington. This week, he is on location at a summit for medicinal products and shares his thoughts about the importance of educating all people about this plant, but especially medical patients. Here's Matthew.
Hi, my name is Matthew Friedlander, owner of Skagit Organics, coming to you with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. So I am here in Tacoma today at the Medical Cannabis Summit hosted by the Cannabis Alliance, Washington's largest and most effective cannabis trade group. And we were discussing today centering patients in the conversation around medical cannabis. So a lot of times when we're talking about medical cannabis, we often come at it from the perspective of the industry, the businesses and the licenses, and the regulatory side of things. And today was a lot of talk about what are the needs of the patients, how do we educate patients to even know about the medical cannabis program here in Washington State, how do we educate the providers and reduce the stigma for them to be able to recommend cannabis to their patients coming through the doors. It was a great conversation, and again, just so great to get together with our community here in Washington State. Always excited to be able to gather in person and discuss these types of topics. So that's what I've got for you out of Washington this week. We will be back next week with more news for you out of Washington State. I am Matthew reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
In one of the newest states to legalize adult use sales of cannabis, Minnesota is slowly rolling out opportunities for licensees. But there are few more concerns in a new state, like will there be any product to sell? Just one of the concerns in Minnesota and all new states to adult use sales. Alysha Bellamy tells us about some towns and cities who are still deciding if they even want stores inside their borders. Here's Alysha.
I'm Alysha Bellamy. For Cannabis Coast to Coast News, this is your Minnesota report. 13 Minnesota cities are actively exploring launching municipal retail stores under the new adult use framework. Anoka, Blaine, Buffalo, Byron, Elk River, Grand Rapids, Lauderdale, Moundsview, St. Anthony Village, St. Joseph, Osseo, Owatonna, and Wyoming are exploring the liquor store approach to cannabis. The Can Grow Grant awardees will be announced December 2025, which teaches farmers how to grow a cash crop. The Can Renew Grant is still open until January 12th, 2026, 4:30 p.m. This is the second round. This grant offers communities that have been negatively affected by the war on cannabis and otherwise distressed communities. The bottleneck still grows and grows in the supply chain, with no licensed transporters and only 2 licensed testing facilities and just a handful of cultivators in place to grow, leaves Minnesota at a bottleneck. I'm Alysha Bellamy for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is your Minnesota Report.
Of course, any movement in the cannabis or hemp space has some kind of impact on the stock market. And when it comes to the volatile nature of publicly traded companies, we turn to our man who is high on Wall Street, Doug Miller. The big question this week is, what impact did the federal hemp ban have on Wall Street? Here's Doug.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Congress has passed legislation starting next year that will ban most consumable hemp-derived cannabinoid products, including popular edibles, drinks, topicals, and Delta H THC style items. The U.S. hemp-derived cannabinoid market is estimated around $28 billion and supporting roughly 300,000 jobs. With the new rules capping THC content to 0.4 milligrams per container and redefining what qualifies as legal hemp, industry insiders are warning up to 95% of current hemp product sales could vanish. For publicly traded cannabis companies, the implications are serious. Firms with hemp product lines face lost revenue, costly reformulation, tighter regulation, and higher compliance burden. Investors are already reacting as valuations have dipped and risk premiums are rising. So let's look at the ETF MSOS as it dipped 16% on the news. It's trading around $3.36, and it looks like it could continue to pull back. That is why it's so important to trade smart and lock in those profits. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
One state that loves to ban products and implement their political power on state business is the state of Ohio. They were already going to ban intoxicating hemp products, and now they have the feds to get it all started. Here's Christina Brisson with our Ohio report.
Hi, I'm Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Not a whole lot going on in Ohio right now, and I'll get into that in a second. But for those of you that live in Talmadge, Ohio, they just got their first dispensary, first one ever since the legalization of cannabis. So congratulations. But as to why we have no more movement, since the whole reopening of the government or partial, they have now decided to ban intoxicating hemp products. So now the argument here is just changing the whole discussion about us regulating it. But Ohio is also saying we're not sure if we're going to comply when we already don't comply with federal cannabis rules. So why not this too? So more to come as this kind of unfolds. Thank you. I am Christina Brisson with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Our last story comes courtesy of Steve Bloom, the celeb stoner out of New York City. And according to our executive producer, Jimmy Young, who you might know as a TV sports talk host for 6 years in Boston, that the sport of basketball has been the most friendly for cannabis users in comparison to other sports. Well, former Celtics star Paul Pierce has a financial interest in the industry, as does the glove Gary Payton. And now Carmelo Anthony has a strain called Stay Mellow. Anthony had a Hall of Famer career with the New York Knicks, and now every time the Knicks play, you can get a 20% discount on his strain from a dispensary in the city called Culture House. One final note. One of the first NBA players to get suspended for drugs in the 1980s when cocaine was the drug of choice has passed away. Michael Ray Richardson was an admitted user and abuser who failed 3 drug tests before getting banned from the league in 1986. He died this week at the age of 70, but he was one of the first professional athletes to be pro-cannabis. The NBA has always been the most tolerant about the treatment of their players, and now they don't even test for cannabis. The jury is still out if the plant medicine is a performance enhancer or a performance diminisher. Well, what do you think? You can leave a comment on that on our YouTube channel. And that'll do it for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so consume it responsibly. I'm Elena Pinto. We leave you now with more of the interview on the impact on the hemp industry ban with our executive producer, Jimmy Young, and Carrie Hinkle, along with Jonathan Miller, General Counsel of the U.S. Hemp Roundtable. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Elena. It's been a difficult week in the world of hemp, and we are so fortunate to be talking with two people. One, of course, you may know if you watch Cannabis Coast to Coast News on a regular basis. His name's Carrie Hinkle. It's his beat, and he used to work for the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, which is the #1 lobby group in Washington, D.C., and we're so fortunate to have their general counsel, Jonathan Miller, joining us, too, as he cruises around the, is it the greater Kentucky or the greater Maryland, Washington, D.C. area, Jonathan?
I am heading from Lexington to Louisville.
Okay,
Kentucky.
There you go. You will definitely have some insight on what's going on and what happened this week. So I guess the first question I do want to ask is, how in the world did this happen, Jonathan?
Well, we had a big victory back in 2018, and thanks to Mitch McConnell, who really got us where we were going. Hemp was legalized after prohibition for decades, and specifically, hemp's derivatives, cannabinoids, and extracts were also made clear to be legal because CBD had been around for a bit, and we wanted to make sure that CBD would be covered. Unfortunately, that bill also gave or acknowledged the jurisdiction over the sale and production of CBD and other hemp products was delegated to the FDA. The FDA pledged that they were going to start regulating our products. Unfortunately, it's 7 years later, and they've done nothing. They, even a few years ago, said after investigating this for 4 years, that we need more authority from Congress to do this. And so what happened was, while this CBD market grew and other great hemp products, such as hemp beverages like the ones that Carrie's company produces, there are also some bad products out there. There are products that are marketed to kids that have bad manufacturing practices, or are copycats of Doritos or candy bars, and it's gotten a lot of people upset. And so there are two solutions to that. One is the FDA can finally start regulating these products, as states have started to. The other solution, unfortunately, has been we should ban everything, not just the bad products, but the good ones as well. And ironically, it was Mitch McConnell who is the one that drafted this legislation, which is basically would ban 95% of all hemp products if we're not able to overturn it in the next year.
And that's a great place to start, because after talking with Thomas Winstanley from edibles.com, he explained that now you have a year to fix this issue. Carrie, I'm going to ask you, and then of course you could pass it over to Jonathan. Is that enough time to get this fixed, Carrie?
Well, we've had 7 years to try, and we've hit the hill a lot, and it's felt like every 3 months or 6 months we would go up and say, please regulate us, and then I'd end it with, I'll see you again in 6 months and ask you again. And so now we have a ticking time bomb where we have to get it done. And, I think Congress has a little ADHD, and that they like to look at the problem of the day and say, well, we have to address this and what has the biggest news today. And unfortunately, maybe fortunately, Mitch McConnell has put a clock on us to say this is the news of the day that has to be done in 363 days now, I think, but who's counting? So we've got to get it done. There's no opportunity. Maybe we get extensions, who knows? But if not, then we need to get this across. We have to find a vehicle to attach it to. There's a lot. While a year may sound like a long time, especially in a business perspective, in Congress, that's a quick sprint to get something done. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of we have to do it. Or else this whole industry goes away. But Jonathan, I'm curious if you have more to add there.
No, you hit it right. The one thing that we are looking at is perhaps trying to get this moratorium extended for another year, another 6 months. That could help us make a difference. But we've been talking about these issues for 7 years now, and it's time to get to action. And we've got members of Congress who are interested in solving this problem, and we're here to help them solve it.
I think it's kind of fascinating as I looked at all the news that was coming out of Washington over the last, I don't know, 43 days, guys, or whatever. I think it's amazing that it took the federal hemp ban possibility and probability to get our government back to work. And that's what I learned when I spent 2 days at lobby days for the NCIA, is that they only pass something when they have to pass it. The appropriations bill. Oh, we're not in business. How can we get this thing back to work? And sure enough, this was kind of a leftover issue that never got done, because you mentioned it, Jonathan. The FDA had 7 years to do something about it, and they did nothing. And that means human behavior takes over, and people figured out a way not only to use 0.3% THC dry weight in the way that it was intended to, but also in a way that it was not intended to, and you have your bad actors and human behavior. So I guess my question is, the whole industry does agree, and I say whole being both sides of this plant now, okay? Is this an opportunity to get both sides of this plant together to agree on what would make sense for both sides of the industry to work properly? What do you think, Jonathan?
By both sides of the industry, are you talking about?
Yes.
By both sides of the industry, are you talking about fiber and grain, or?
No, very good though. You're a good attorney, I can tell. No, I'm talking about cannabis.
Or are you talking about
legal adult
marijuana?
use? Right. I don't like to use the M word at all. That being said, I usually say MJ. That being said, you understand, I know you do, that there has been they've done a great job of putting both sides of this plant, the federally legal definition of hemp side and the state adult use and medical marijuana side. See, I had to use it, but I had to use it with medical against each other. And that makes no sense because it's the same plant. That's my frustration, Jonathan.
Yeah. So the marijuana industry is kind of divided on this issue. We have a number of major marijuana companies that are in the hemp space and support us. But unfortunately, there are a number of the big MSOs, the multi-state operators, who view hemp as competition and have been part of the efforts to ban us. And I wish they would change their minds, but they've been running victory laps over the last several days. So I'm not sure we can work with those folks, but those in the marijuana industry and a lot of folks who are consumers, support hemp as well. So we're hopeful that they will join us.
Yeah, and Jimmy, I think that perfect world is you see some states on the alcohol side where beer can be sold everywhere, but liquor is only in package store, right? Is that the same general bare bones where we get low dose hemp products in every outlet and on premise, and high dose products, high milligrams, flour, those types of products are in your quote unquote package stores, or of course in this example would be a dispensary. So is that the world where a perfect framework state by state comes together? That's kind of pie in the sky, but it's just something as a where the two sides might be able to agree on, and in particular on beverages, because we know dispensary sales, less than 1% of them are beverages. Those consumers like to get them when they're at the grocery store, when they're at a package store, when they're out and about in their normal everyday lives buying a six-pack. They like to buy their six-pack of hemp beverages. Those same consumers just do not shop in the dispensary channel. So we have seen less pushback specific to the beverage category. And now gummies is where it gets a little bit more tricky. Of course, edibles sell well in dispensary, but they also sell well in mainstream channels. So maybe that's where the milligram dose comes out. There's nothing to that. It's just is this how perfectly we could all get together and sing Kumbaya would be ideal to me.
That's me, and I can lead that for sure. What is is it the reason? And again, I'm asking the hemp side about the MSO side. And we know that the MSOs, a lot of them have publicly traded, and they work for their investors, I think is the best way to describe it. And it's all about making money for them. And they saw the hemp industry as a threat to that. So of course they decided to draw a line in the cannabis sativa field. And it really bothers me because the whole point of this plant is to heal. And I just hope one day that both sides can figure out a way to heal the rift that has kind of emerged over this battle. Jonathan, is that possible at all?
So it's a one-way fight. So hemp is not trying to undermine marijuana. We support rescheduling. We support descheduling. We support Safe Banking Act. We're very supportive of the marijuana industry in total. It's just these handfuls of MSOs who want to kill us. So really, that question needs to be asked of those marijuana folks. Would they be willing to allow for a hemp industry to exist?
And I hope that we're not going to take exactly what you said about killing you, but they'd like you to go away, maybe a nicer euphemism, if you will. And again, they shouldn't be taking it out on the hemp industry. They should be taking it out on our leaders. And you mentioned Mitch McConnell, and I think it's very interesting. In the same state of Kentucky, you guys have a friend in Rand Paul, right? Gary, I mean, yes, no, yes, right?
Yeah.
So
most of them are our friends. Rand Paul's terrific. Jamie Comer is a big supporter. Andy Barr, Thomas Massey, Morgan Garvey. It's just McConnell. It's on the other side.
Right. And McConnell, I lived to see the day where he actually admitted they made a mistake by doing this. Was not their intent. And that means, once again, they didn't take the time to learn about this plant, how it works, how it interacts with the endocannabinoid system, how it interacts with every other mammal on Earth, because every mammal has an endocannabinoid system. It's tied to the brain, and it impacts all the other systems in our bodies. That being said, you even had the best public service announcement I've seen in my 8 years of covering this industry, posted by the president. If finally, is there a way to use the scuttlebutt about rescheduling to get both sides of both industries to accept that? Or are we still going to start over again and when the government runs out of money in the end of January? Or is it going to all come down to the midterm elections when all of a sudden things are starting to move? I have no idea what's going to happen. This is totally speculative. I throw that out for discussion. And Kerry, I'll let you go first, and then we'll go back to Jonathan.
Yeah, I think the reschedule deschedule conversation is particularly relevant here if we're not able to get a regulatory bill passed. Now we are stuck with a hemp ban where state by state you can do intrastate sales of hemp products, but you cannot do interstate. And so, if we get descheduled, are we now then, subject to the same 280E provisions that, MSOs and cannabis operators are facing? And whereas in states that have codified and protected hemp, if we're rescheduled, are we now then able to at least enjoy access to banking and enjoy access to mainstream retail and big boxes, even though it would be within a state and you've got to grow it, process it, manufacture it, and don't cross that state line with it? This is, again, worst case scenario, assuming we don't get the regulatory bill we'd like. But that becomes even more relevant if we're going to face this hemp ban that we would need to be rescheduled so we can at least be able to process credit cards.
Jonathan, can this actually help the overall cause? Because now it is really front and center, and now you've got people's jobs being threatened. You've got tax revenue involved now too. Can this help get both sides to the table, talking the right way to the government, and somehow or other come up with a constructive way to work together, not apart?
Again, Jimmy, we're open to working together.
Okay.
And we'd love to have them on our side. It's you've got to get one of them on these calls on your program to ask them whether they're willing to work with us.
Well, that's next week's news. Okay.
Okay. Good.
Because I got the reaction from the industry that's most impacted first, because first of all, I thought, I was surprised, I'll be honest, that this even happened. I know it was a fight, and you knew it was always possible. Kerry, we've always put Andy Harris out there as public enemy number 1 or 2 for this cause. And he didn't necessarily go away. And then you had, I think it was Mary Martin, was it?
Mary Miller.
Mary Miller. Mary Martin's from Wizard of Oz. You can tell where my head's at, right? Anyway, or Peter Pan, I guess it was. I guess it was Peter Pan, Mary Martin, right?
She was J.R. Larry Hagman's mother, J.R. Ewing's mother.
There you go. Thank you for that. Thank God I have somebody that's age appropriate on this call. Anyway, sorry. Sorry, Kerry.
Yeah, that one went over my head.
I knew it would. And by the way, Jonathan, it's amazing to me that I'm a baby boomer. I admit it. Okay, there you go. To still try and explain to people what it was like in the 60s and 70s and 80s in this country. And it boggles my mind that I have to educate pretty much anybody who's under 50 now about how the fact that we had two presidential candidates actually mention the word marijuana in this campaign. Okay. The fact that we have hemp being sold unregulated in convenience stores and gas stations is unbelievable to me. And then we have an overregulated legal adult use in 24 states. I can't believe I lived to see this day, and I'm right in the middle of it. Sometimes I do pinch myself, and other times I bang my head against the wall. Jonathan, what would you like to see accomplished, at least in the next, let's say, 30 days? What would be a good goal for the hemp industry?
We'd like to see our legislation that would regulate the hemp industry, not ban it. We'd like to see it introduced. We'd like to see a hearing in a congressional committee, and so that we see some progress and move towards making sure that the legislation's passed by the time the year runs out.
Can I ask a question that I've always wondered? Why is it the FDA and not the USAG, the agricultural group, that should, I still maintain this is something you grow. I mean, there are plenty of other commodities out there that are grown, soybean, of the whole commodities world, and they're regulated by the agriculture. This is a plant medicine, and that word medicine has a lot of different derivatives too. That being said, would you rather see the USAG or the FDA? Since the FDA hasn't done anything, I say take it away from them and give it to the agricultural group. That's what I say. But I'm just a guy from Massachusetts, so you know what that means.
Yeah, I mean, we'd prefer the USDA, but when it comes to things that have medicinal effect, it generally goes to the FDA. Now, there's another agency called TTB, the Alcohol and Tobacco Bureau, that regulates beer and wine and liquor, and potentially that might be the right body to regulate hemp beverages. But we're kind of stuck with the FDA on the edible and edible side.
And again, another reason why this plant should have its own regulatory body, or because I don't think any of the existing departments want to deal with this. That's what I think is going on. And it's easier for them to say, no, delay, than say, okay, we'll take on this regulation. And that Tobacco and Tax Bureau is part of one of the bills that's in the House right now, the States Act 2.0, if I remember correctly. Yes,
that's correct. Yeah.
I just went, thanks. I like to get affirmations that I actually know what I'm talking about every once in a while. Kerry, what exactly would you like to see your group accomplish? We got what Jonathan would like to see in the next 30 days. From someone who's part of Bayou City Hemp now, what are some of the goals? What have you guys had for discussions? I mean, this isn't, I'm guessing for the industry, it wasn't a total surprise, but here it is. Maybe the day came a lot sooner than you expected.
Yeah, I think Monday night I put my head down on the pillow like, Congress has banned hemp. This is crazy. And come around Friday morning, I've got a pep in my step and feel a lot better as far as the opportunity to finally be on big box retail. That is where my head's at. That's where my focus is in the next year is getting that regulatory bill that Jonathan mentioned across the board, because, we just signed with the second biggest distributor in the country on alcohol. They're a $15 billion company and been around for 100 years. They're going to be able to get us into those conversations, and they've had them. They know the retailers, all the big players. We know Target in Minnesota is carrying it. But, being able to get in that room and on those shelves, a lot of these retailers say, I don't want to get up this valuable shelf space for a product that, before Sunday night, they just deemed as a loophole and unregulated. And now we've got a year to finally get this across the board. When the FDA gives that sign of approval, when, it's not an if, I'm going to say when, Jimmy, when Morgan Griffith and Ron Wyden get this bill passed, right? Kroger and those retailers like that are going to say, all right, we've got approval from the federal government. to carry these products. We know consumers want them. We've seen them sell well in smaller channels. Let's go ahead and open that up, and we're just going to see, you know, a growth revenue on our end, that's just good. You know, we're talking production schedules already. Like, how are we going to keep up for that demand? If, you know, we're in Texas, HEB is the largest retailer in Texas. If we're on those shelves, like, what's that like? How do we maintain that? And those buyers, they want it. They've seen alcohol sales decline. They understand consumer trends are shifting, and they just want a check from the government, that checkbox that says, yep, we're okay. We're not going to pull this rug out underneath you. We give you the blessing to sell, let's say, you know, 5, 10, 20 milligram beverages, and we're good to go, and we'll keep this thing moving, Jimmy. So for our company, we've always operated in the low dose space because we want to be on those mainstream shelves. And I view it this now, again, 72 hours post the sky falling. I view this now as the biggest opportunity to finally get on those mainstream shelves.
And Jonathan, do you echo that?
I do. I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for us, and you know, we've got to take advantage of it while we have the chance.
That's right. And you get the prize, Jonathan, for being a great sport and interview while you're driving to join us. And I appreciate it. As the guy who's going to be editing this, you're giving me a challenge, okay? But I promise you, when you see the final product, you'll enjoy it. And I so appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. And just know you always will have a friend in this space to talk to at any time. And that's not Kerry, that's me, okay? You can call me Rex now, all right? Just, and I really and truly, I do appreciate it. And Kerry, you know how I feel about you. I don't want to embarrass you anymore, okay? Because I've shared a couple of things. And I tell you, you've taken our news that was really focused on one side of this issue for 3-4 years that I've been doing this now, and brought it back into, this is the same plant. Somehow, some way, the pie is big enough. Everybody can get the right slice if they work together, as opposed to, as you've said, Jonathan, don't just ban it because you don't understand it. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. So again, guys, thank you for joining us here on this edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, and we'll have more news after this.